couple of days ago, I met at the Douglas County Courthouse a 39-year-old woman who was having some troubles, and I gave her some advice. Then today, I met a 19-year-old young man over at my beloved Smoothie King here in Castle Rock, and he was having troubles, and I gave him some advice. And I would like to think that and hope that somebody would be able to see this video that has same or similar situations and learn something from what I'm about to say. With a tangled skein, this derives from Greek mythology. There is Clotho. Clotho is the weaver of the threads that are placed into the tapestry of life. Lachesis is the one who places them, and Atropos is the one who makes them final, who cuts them short when it's time. All right? A 15-year-old girl in 1944, very thin from having been starved under the Nazi regime and oppression in Holland at the time, was recruited into the Dutch resistance. She ran back and forth using the trains running secrets across Europe. 15-year-old kid doing this, right? After the war, she took what dance training she had, she got into ballet. She did very well by it. She ended up getting a job for 1 franc more a week than a ballet dancer, so she in essence became a showgirl or slash go-go dancer. Somewhere along the way, she was offered a small part in a movie. Right? And we'll skip forward to 1952, and she's brought into a Broadway play, and she meets a French novelist. Right? So now let's skip forward to another individual. In 1958, he writes his first book. New York writer, becomes very successful, does very well by it. In 1959, he hears about some murders in the state of Kansas. He grabs his assistant, they get on a train, and they drive, well, they take the train out to Kansas. It took 4 years of research and waiting for the finality of the trial before he could take what he's seen in this small Kansas town. It's called Holcomb, Kansas. Small Kansas town, before he was able to get enough information, finality, what happens to the murderers, for him to be able to write his book. While he's having to wait, his assistant writes her book in 1960. In 1961, she gets a Pulitzer Prize for it. In 1962, it's made into a movie. It isn't until 1966 that the New York writer is finally able to publish his book about the murders in Kansas. The first book he wrote was Breakfast at Tiffany's. The second book he wrote was In Cold Blood. It was Truman Capote. His assistant was Harper Lee. The books that she wrote while he was having to wait was To Kill a Mockingbird. Truman's first book was made into a movie. Breakfast at Tiffany's, starring Audrey Hepburn, the little Dutch girl. We have to understand that even though we have adversity in our lives, and we all do, that it isn't what we've done in our past that matters. It's what we make of ourselves on a daily basis moving forward. We have to learn from our mistakes. And I am the poster boy of making mistakes in my youth. All of our pain and suffering in this world comes from Buddhist philosophy boiled down into a nutshell. You watch my videos, you know I've been in martial arts for decades. You study a lot of Eastern philosophy when you're in martial arts. And this derives from Buddhism. It's called the Four Noble Truths. And in a nutshell, it says substantially that all of our pain and suffering in this world comes from unmet want and desire. I want a bigger house. I want a nicer car. I want a better job. I want a younger wife. And when we don't have these things, this is what causes our frustration and our suffering, right? We have to learn how to be able to be happy with what we have. Now, admittedly, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't stay stagnant where you're at. You need to move for a better tomorrow, but you can't, rob stores, and you can't engage in activity that's contrary to law, and in some senses, social norms, simply because you want something more in your life. It helps. There are a few things that I tell people to do if they want to straighten their lives out, and they got to listen. Number one is get off the booze. I lost 20 years of my life into a bottle. I lost my driver's license for 19 years. Not necessarily correlated, but it's all derived from dumb behavior when I was younger. You know, stay off the drugs. And the third one is, for the gentlemen in the world, is to stay away from women. The sad fact is that the game has changed. You know, you don't want to hear it. It used to be that you could grow up, meet a nice girl, have kids, have grandkids, grow old and die. It's not like that anymore. There is no point at which there's finality. A female can come back 20 or 30, 40 years later. There's no statute of limitations, at least not in Colorado. They can change their minds, and anything that used to be consensual, they can decide that wasn't consensual. And now you're looking at not just criminal time, but civil penalties. So they can just make this stuff up. They can change their minds. The jury never gets to hear the fact that the case is 30 years old. It's not pertinent to the case. And so what it really boils down to is that the way the statutes are framed is that women are considered incompetent before the law because there's no point at which they're ever held responsible for their decisions. Men pay the price for it. So to the men out there, you got to stay off the booze, stay off the drugs, and stay away from women. I suggest to all men, run far, run fast, because it's not worth it. I have a lot of other little stories like this that are very same and similar. There was a young girl that was New York. Dad's, I think he was doing his internship in some hospital. So mom and the little girl go upstairs one day to the hospital and say, "Hey, daddy, daddy," says, "would you like to catch some lunch?" And daddy, daddy, daddy says, "Can't do it today, girls," says, "I'm too busy." So the mom and the daughter come out, and the mom looks at the little girl and says, she's like 12 years old, says, "What do you want for lunch?" And she goes, "I want pizza. I want pizza." He says, "Well, no, these are observant Jews, and of course there's pig, and it said you don't normally go for pizza." But well, don't tell your dad. So she goes into the pizza parlor with her mom, and there's an agent, scout, sitting in the back of the restaurant, notices the girl, walks up and starts talking to the mom, hands over the business card and says, "Oh, we've got this project for it. We've got this project, and we just can't quite find an actress that has the right look. I don't know what it is, but there's a look that they look for." Says, "Give us a call, come on down and do a quick reading and see how it works out." And mom talks to the father, and they say, "Well, it's an opportunity. You never know." So what do you do? Says they go in, and the kid just nails it. Just absolute natural, just nails it. So the mom and the daughter get on a plane, fly out to France, and they shoot the movie, and it becomes very successful. And that's how we found Natalie Portman. These random chance meetings in the world matter. You want to talk to everybody. You know, it's networking, just like in all sales. Sales matter. Why? Because of networking. You never know who somebody else knows. So that's one of the reasons why I talk to everybody I meet everywhere I go. Because not only am I currently shilling for my YouTube channel, but I've always done it. I've done it all my life because you never know where your opportunities are going to be provided. So to those two individuals that I spoke to, one at Douglas County Courthouse, because I'm always in there filing stuff and picking stuff up, and the young man at Smoothie King says you have to understand that when you're younger, everything seems to be an emergency. When you get old-ish, I call myself old-ish, I'm not quite old yet, you realize that very little in this world is actually where you need to really it becomes an emergency. It's a rush job, as it were. You need to be able to look at it in perspective and realize that in the scheme of things, 20, 30 years later, you look back at this stuff and just realize that most of the stuff that we think is important when we're young really isn't. There are a few things that you have to be very mindful of. One of them is anything to do with the courts. You know, if you're on probation, you got to do everything that you're supposed to do and don't play games. And if you can't do that, you're going to wish you had, especially if you look back years later. Because if you get a felony charge dropped on you because they give you a chance with a deferred judgment and you don't take care of business and they bust you on that probation and they move forward to trial, and they'll take your plea and they send you, and you get it, you're going to wish that you did not have a felony charge on your record, because it becomes almost impossible to get a decent job. There are a few exceptions. You can always become self-employed, of course, and that's why so many business owners actually have felony convictions, because that's the only way they can earn a living. They don't want to go back into crime, dealing or something. So they're smart enough to go straight. They start their own businesses, and if they work hard and save and invest and stay out of trouble, they can become very wealthy. So there we go. Those are some tidbits from somebody who's been around for several decades now, sadly. And you have to understand that these random chance meetings matter, and take it to heart, especially the gentlemen out there. Stay off the booze. I mean, one beer. You think it's just one beer. It's not just one beer. That one beer is changing your brain chemistry, right? And it's not until you've been off the booze for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years before your brain chemistry actually goes back to normal. You don't feel it because it's just a glass of wine, or it's just a beer, or a shot of whiskey or something, but you're changing your brain chemistry. And for the matter, stay away from women. It's not like it used to be. I've been extremely fortunate with the women I've had in my life, but I look at the young men today and the women that they have available to them, and they're crazy. They're absolutely insane, and it's not just because they're insane. It's because the legal system has changed in such a way that it's so adverse, so predatory against men's interests, that no man with any brains has anything to do with women in a modern context. It's a very, very, very bad idea. So thanks for the time.